An illustration tonight about just how far left some Democratic presidential candidates seem willing to go to get the nomination. At least 3 of them are now supporting a position Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama would not take: reparations for African Americans. With that, let's bring in our panel: Democratic strategist Zach Friend, the president and co-founder of Real Clear Politics, Tom Bevan, and a senior columnist at townhall.com, Kurt Schlichter. Gentlemen, great to have you.
Good to be here.
Zach, I'm going to play the sound from Senator Kamala Harris, and I'll ask you to react to it.
So when we're talking about recognizing the inequalities, the inequities, it's not about saying I'm trying to take from those who have achieved success if they've played by the rules and worked hard. Good for you, keep it. But I am saying we need to be honest and address that not everyone has an equal opportunity to access to success, and we've got to address that.
So, Zach, is $1 trillion or more to the African-American community the way to go?
Well, I think a couple things on this. I happen to know Senator Harris personally, and she definitely is a social justice person, and I'm not surprised that this is a position that she's taking. But I think that overall, issues like this are going to continue to come up in a Democratic primary when you don't have a clear front runner.
Right.
In these kinds of issues, I mean, similar in 2016 when you had 17 Republicans running, one of the ways that the now President Trump really differentiated himself was by taking, I think, what a lot of the Republican establishment would have said were pretty controversial stands on immigration. So, too, I think in the Democratic primary, you're going to have some stances that maybe don't jive with a lot of the general election voters in the Democratic base. And so I think that there's going to be some stuff coming up over the next month or 2 months that will be having the same conversation.
Well, Senator Harris is not alone. Take a listen to Senator Elizabeth Warren tonight in Manchester, New Hampshire.
Ugly history of racism. We need to confront it head on, and we need to talk about the right way to address it and make change.
Tom, is there a fear of being seen as a moderate if you're not all in on these liberal ideas?
Well, certainly that's where the energy is on the Democratic side is pulling everybody leftward. I mean, but this is an issue that is terribly unpopular in the mainstream of the country, and this is one that's going to be hard for Democrats who go on record supporting something like this to come back in a general election and sort of a position they're going to climb down from. And I always take these issues and look at them. This election is going to boil down to about 7 states. All the rest are already pretty much decided. And you're talking about, so how do all these various issues, including this one, play in places like Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Florida? I mean, that's where it's going to matter. And it's not a popular position. So I think this is a real problem for Democrats.
The National Review, seeing politics here, writing, quote, "The proposals are not intended to mitigate evil. They're intended to make Elizabeth Warren or Kamala Harris or Kirsten Gillibrand president of the United States." Kurt, your reaction?
Oh, well, look, I couldn't support this more. I'm a conservative. I want the Republican to win. And Tom's absolutely right. This kind of moral idiocy is poison in the swing states. I mean, I want to see these guys go into Ohio saying, hey, guys, everybody, reparations. That's the real issue. Not the economy, not getting your kids out of endless wars, reparations. But, Mike, I'm still puzzled. How does this work? My beautiful wife escaped from the Democrats' favorite communist hellhole, Cuba. How much does she owe? And my great-great-grandfather, he fought with the Union Army. Do I get a discount? How does this work? It's stupid. It's immoral. And I want the Democrats to keep doing it and self-destruct.
Zach, all indications are this is going to be a really crowded field, which we expect to maybe up to 25 or so candidates. Is the critical thing to make sure a chunk of the left base is fired up about you?
Well, we have an exceptionally fired up base. If you think about the 2018 midterm elections, it was clear that there were a lot of new voters turning out. However, the reason the Democrats won the House were actually in some of these suburban swing districts that actually do not have the same type of fired up base that some of these other districts had. So I agree with Tom in the sense that you're going to have to find a way to parse that difference, to actually win through the industrial Midwest. Ultimately, in 2020, the election still will be won in the states that are always the swing states over the last 20 years.
Tom, what do Vice President Biden and Senator Sherrod Brown, the folks who could play well with those white working class voters, do? Do they jump on the reparations bandwagon, or do they stay out of it?
Well, we'll have to see. I mean, I think Sherrod Brown has been sort of cautious in some of these positions, Medicare for all, et cetera. And he talks about it in terms of, he wants to be practical and get things that, and Amy Klobuchar says the same thing. She doesn't want pie in the sky. She wants things that can actually be achieved in the short term. Certainly reparations is not one of those things. So, the Democrats are in a dilemma here because privately you will hear Democrats say we need a white male to win the 2020 election. Publicly, though, they're not saying that. And in fact, it's quite the opposite. People are looking toward, females, persons of color. Those are sort of the cachet for Democrats who are running in this primary election. So it's a real dilemma for Democrats, I think, come the general election.
Kurt, how alarmed do you think some of these white male potential candidates are at this point? You heard Bernie Sanders complain about it, but you have maybe Joe Biden, Senator Sherrod Brown. Should they be alarmed that this may not be the year for a Democrat white male?
I think they should, because the Democrat Party is completely obsessed with race. Now, I want it to be because I want them to lose. And here's the dirty little secret about Republicans. You get us a conservative, we'll happily vote for a differently abled lesbian Hindu of color if that person is going to support a strong military, a strong economy, the First, Second, and even Third Amendments. We're looking for values. They're looking for a check in the box, and that's why they're going to lose next year.
Gentlemen, thanks so much. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Rage versus results and the great Democrat freakout. That's the focus of tonight's angle. Being a liberal means never having to say you're sorry. An overstatement? Well, maybe. But given some of the more recent politically inspired acts of vandalism and violence, and of defamation and libel, it's closer to the truth than not. 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, it would have been unthinkable that major political and media figures would bend over backwards to excuse criminal behavior because they agreed with the perpetrator's political motivation. Yet in this age of rage, this happens all too frequently.
Didn't Jussie conflate the two? Didn't he, in fact, attempt to paint the MAGA supporters as these racist and homophobic people? I think
I have to disagree with you there.
If the story's true,
yeah. Well, but Michelle, I have to respectfully disagree. I think MAGA supporters have painted themselves as that.
Okay, well, the Jussie Smollett case is all at once depressing and enlightening. Well, it's depressing because so many seemed positively giddy. They were thrilled that a hate crime like that would have happened. Finally, they could draw a direct line from the support for Trump to support for almost a lynching. You had a noose, you had a racial and anti-gay slur. It was the politically perfect storyline that pushed all the right anti-Trump buttons.
A Hollywood star who's black and gay, and now the victim of a heinous crime.
The idea of racial slurs and maybe even some of the homophobic slurs being used toward him, you can see how serious this crime is right now.
Absolutely despicable. And this is America in 2019.
So now, even when it seems like the entire thing was a sick charade, the race hustlers remain undaunted.
Interesting when you use hatred and bigotry and lying for your own selfish end, and you're a young black kid, gay black kid, you get indicted. If you do it when you're an old white guy, you become president. And I think there are enough monsters out there for real that we don't have to make any up. And I think that, white supremacists has never, they're at a historical high.
Now focus on that last line for just a moment. White supremacy in 2019 is worse than it was, let's say, in 1963 in Birmingham, Alabama, when water cannons and dogs were released on civil rights marchers, when children were blown up in churches. Trump-hating comedians, undeterred by actual facts, are suddenly aggressively unfunny. Comedian Billy Eichner saying, if it turns out the attack was staged, that is disgusting. But don't give me any BS about MAGA supporters being the victim here. A bunch of white supremacists falsely accused of inspiring a crime are still a bunch of white supremacists. They poison the soul of our country and of the world, and the crimes against humanity will be felt long after we've forgotten about Jussie Smollett. Crimes against humanity? Okay. Billy, like what? Policies that grow the economy and spur wage and job growth across the board, including for African Americans? That crime against humanity? Or the crime against humanity of creating, what, opportunity zones in some of our most debilitated communities? Or is it the crime of criminal justice reform that's a crime against humanity? You see what I'm saying? It's patently ridiculous. But this is all very enlightening, is it not? Because here's what's really happening. Trump's policies are actually working. We see it all around us. The Mueller report, it looks like it's going to be a dud. And liberal heroes are self-combusting before our very eyes. So the Democrat protectorate are in total freak-out mode. Let's look back. Their Kavanaugh accuser, Blasey Ford, flamed out. Their indigenous 2020 hopeful, Elizabeth Warren, was knocked off her high horse. Virginia's Democrat leaders are tangled up in blackface and Me Too scandals. And now, with Smollett, their dream of the perfect Trump-inspired hate crime has also fizzled. So now we're back to Donald Trump being Hitler, Pol Pot, and Stalin all rolled into one. That's the best they have. And while they mouth the requisite if Jussie did it, and this is wrong, well, they quickly then revert to their tired old narrative that today minorities should live in fear. Comedian Hari Kondabolu tweeting, "What Jussie Smollett is accused of is despicable. However, don't forget that we believed he was the victim of such horrendous hate crime because it's the type of thing that happens way too often, especially in the Trump era." He may have taken advantage of a very realistic fear. And the queen of racial fear-mongering, Mad Maxine Waters, she freely admits she believed Jussie's ridiculous story because his views checked all the liberal boxes.
He's a friend. He was at my office. We marched in the Pride Parade together. He introduced me at Black Girls Rock, and so I believed him when I heard about it.
Well, if Congresswoman Waters wanted to learn something, she might try to engage with black Americans who see this all very differently. They aren't looking to blame Trump or conservatives for all of their woes, past or present. What they're looking for are real solutions and real hope.
Every citizen alive today and generations yet unborn are forever in debt of the brave souls who stared down injustice and championed the eternal cause of civil rights. And by the way, as you've been hearing me say, African American unemployment is at an all-time low, historic low.
Well, the scene last night at the White House is part of what inspires the ongoing Democrat freakout. The real possibility that President Trump, at the Black History Month celebration, it was oversubscribed, had more than 300 people, people couldn't even get in, that maybe, just maybe, Donald Trump could peel off 5%, maybe even 10% more of the black vote in 2020. That's unnerving to the left. But there's a new movement emerging.
I really don't even understand why so many people hate black people, well, people that look like me and him, hate this president. Because this man has done more than any other president has done for people that look like me and him.
I always said, don't get caught up in the emotions.
What about the S-hole countries comment? And what about, well, you know, it's always...
That's emotional. That don't pay bills. That don't build
exactly.
businesses. That doesn't do anything except keep this junk going that has no substance in black America.
Well, the Democrats' race baiting and the fear-mongering, it's only going to go so far. But if they keep it up, emotionally worn-out African-American voters may do what Democrats fear most: tune them out and focus on Trump's record of accomplishment in their communities. And that's the angle.